Welcome back, listeners, to a new episode of The New Standard. And as always, on my left, I have my partner in crime, Neal Coolong. What's up, Neal?
It's a beautiful morning. I've got a big family event this weekend for the Steelers bye, along with regular work stuff. So I'm kind of hustling to get a lot of that stuff done, but I'm excited. And I am, as always, excited to be here with you, Lance.
Well, all things are possible when you're wearing a Bison t shirt.
Amen. 4-0. North Dakota State taking on, I don't know, but they're probably going to win because, well, they win 12, 13 out of 14. So we're excited about that as well, of course.
Well,
check out the Bison have a couple pro prospects this year. They've not usually they have one or two. It's not rare, but they got like 3 or 4 now. An interesting team this year.
well, I'm sure Bison football is better than cow football, but that's another story for another day. Before we hop into the program, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of the program, High Bar Apparel. Make sure you go to highbarapparel.com and check out their gear. It's my little cousin, Steven Johnson, who's doing it. So make sure you go out there and support High Bar Apparel. Also, if you want to get connected with the program, there are a variety of ways. Of course, you can join us live on Thursdays at 6 a.m. PST and 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll not be doing a show this Sunday because the Steelers are on a bye, but typically the show is on Thursday and we do a post game on Sunday. And of course, that can alternate given Thursday night football. Also, if you want to check out the show in podcast form, it's available on all platforms: Google, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And that's how you can connect with us. And if you're on with us on YouTube, make sure you give us a like and a subscription, and please spread the word. So, Neal, let's jump into, because you weren't on the program on Sunday, give me your thoughts on the Seahawks game. A quick rehash of that.
I love the first half. The second half was not good, and it was a fun overtime, as quick as it was. Actually, kind of a longer overtime than what you normally see. It just nobody did anything with the exception of T.J. Watt and Chris Boswell. So it was fun to see them be able to finally put the hammer down. We saw a lot of good things in the first half. We did not see very many good things in the second half. I really think that it encapsulated a lot of what who the Steelers are at this point in the season. We're going to have games like this. We're going to see more of this. Without diving into the weeds about adjustments and all these cliche buzz terms, the reality is they're probably not good enough to play at the level we saw in the first half for 4 quarters. I don't think that's going to be something we see often. Perhaps if they play, the lesser teams that are going to be on their schedule coming up here. But they got a pretty tough finish to this season, and they're going to lose games. They're going to pull out a couple wins as well, and we're going to see good things along with bad things, which I think really was Sunday night. It was a charged game. It was an energized game until the second half, really. Couldn't stop the run to save their lives. Cam Hayward alone probably saved 14 points. Their front 7 is struggling pretty badly outside of him. Without the edges, I shouldn't say the front 7, the middle defense of their team, really their defensive line and their inside linebackers are not playing well, and certainly did not, with the exception again of Cam Hayward on Sunday. And I think we're going to see a lot of that as the season continues.
Let me add to your point about them not being able to play 4 quarters like they did in the first half. And I have my notes here, and I have a note to myself that says why the Seahawks game was scary. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Seahawks game was scary is that, with 500 teams, and we'll talk about that on the next point, 500 teams, they're inconsistent. And so what you're going to see are inconsistent patches per series, possibly possibly per half, per quarter, and per game. And the scary thing for me when I looked at that game at Seattle was, they went to overtime against a Seattle team that was quarterbacked by Geno Smith. That's scary. And what that means is that they are what their record says they are, which is the title of the show. There are 500 teams. So what you see may be what you get. It may not be what you get. It's just what you see. It's going to be football that you see, and you're going to have no idea what it's going to be and what it's going to look like. But the fact that they struggled against a Geno Smith led team at home who traveled from Seattle to Pittsburgh lends you to believe that this team overall is just an average team, which is suggested by their record. And speaking to the 500 record, because I have a thought, and I wrote it here before we jump into sort of the state of the Steelers. Are all 500 teams equal? I know they're equal on their record, but let's take Cleveland, for example, who's also 500, who's going into the game tonight without Baker Mayfield. Some 500 teams, in my opinion, although the records are the same, aren't the same. I think if you looked at Cleveland and you compared them to the Steelers, if you looked at position groups along the roster, although, again, the records are the same, Cleveland is much better in terms of its talent and its personnel than the Steelers at key positions. I think they're better overall on the offensive line, clearly better at running back. I think the wide receivers are even, and just et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what's your thought to that question? Are all 500 teams equal? Because in this case, I don't necessarily think so.
Let's go into this first. The concept of you are what your record says you are is an axiom that Bill Parcells coined. I'm sure he wasn't the first person to say it, but he made it popular. There is a line of thinking in which that makes sense. What that really means, though, is that nothing else matters. This is where we are right now. It kind of is an older version of the standard is the standard. This is who we are. Details are irrelevant. We are in this position right now, and this is where we need to operate. Not all 500 teams are equal, and I'll say that very simply, that the Steelers are not on the level of the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are not playing better than a 500 team right now, but if they were facing each other this week, you could play that game in Kansas City, Pittsburgh, on Mars. The Chiefs are going to be favored, and the Chiefs are probably going to win that game. It's going to take a lot for Pittsburgh to beat a team like that, regardless of what Kansas City has done to this point in the season. The Steelers are a 500 team with, really, let's be honest, are they not really closer to 2-4 than 4-3 or 4-2? I mean, they're not playing better than what they are right now. In fact, they're probably overreaching a little bit. So to me, the idea of other 500 teams being on the same level as Pittsburgh, below the surface, because on the surface, if the only thing we're looking at right now is simply records, and with that, what playoff positioning would be like, the Steelers would get into the playoffs. They would be the 7th seed right now.
Oh, yes. I'm glad you brought that up. That's a pet peeve I'm going to jump into at the end of the program.
Yeah, that is true. It's factual that's where they are. You play more than 6 games in a season for a reason. You know, they've got a long way to go. Their schedule is going to get a lot more difficult as the season wears on here. So to me, it's good on them for getting to this point. I think it says a lot about the ability that they have as a team to come together, the way that the coaches have prepared them to play. They're playing probably a bit above where their talent level suggests that they should be, in my opinion. Now, I understand that fans think that their receiving core is fantastic and they have all these weapons everywhere and they can do all these things. Every team has at least what they have. Okay, they're not a talented offense, not an exceptionally talented offense. They have guys that can make plays. Everybody has guys that can make plays. Okay, it's them in comparison to everyone else, and we saw this over large stretches of the game on Sunday, and to some degree, every game this season. They're not good enough to sustain plays. They don't make plays. You know, Seattle's defense was not a good defensive team coming in, held the Steelers to two explosive plays in the game, 25 plus yards, 2 of them. That's it. That's probably Pittsburgh's average for the season, to be honest. They're not doing better than that. So as far as where they are with their record in comparison to other people, no, every 500 team is absolutely not the same. Some are going up, some are going down, some are exactly where they're supposed to be. I think Pittsburgh is probably going up a little bit more, perhaps over the mid portion of the season. I think we'll see some good things from them. But I've said this a bunch of times, Lance. This is a team that's going to have 2 3-game losing streaks and 1 4-game winning streak. They're going to be very hot and cold. They're going to be up and down. the 4-game winning streak doesn't look all that good right now, to be honest with you. So I'm not exactly sure if that's the way it's going to work out. But my point is they're going to go on streaks, and they're going to end up probably 7-10. Like I said, 8-9. I don't think is out of the realm of possibility. But there will be a 3-week stretch in which we'll be really excited, and there'll be a 3-week stretch that we're thinking they're a top 5 drafting team. They're going to be just up and down like that.
Well, we're going to pick the rest of the season. That's one thing we're going to do on the show. And I'm glad you brought the offense, because I think that's a nice way to transition to just the question. Your record, you are what your record says it is. And we're going to shift to that in terms of both of the units, offensively and defensively. I'm going to break down a couple of numbers. And when you hear the numbers, point out a number that you think is most significant. I'll do that first, and then I'll throw it to you. And so let me just run down these numbers right now. And to your point about the Steelers being closer to 2-4, maybe 1-5, I think what most illustrates that is right now the Steelers have scored 117 points and given up 132. That's a -15. That is the sign of a bad football team. They're a -2.5 per game, meaning they're getting outscored by almost a field goal every single game. That's bad. That is not the mark of a really good football team. And there's a lot of improvement, like Wes Hickok said, big up Wes, that that they've got a lot of improvement to do, but the bye week came at a good time. Absolutely. So let me jump into these offensive numbers really quickly here. So right now at the bye, the Steelers offense is averaging 19.5 points, which is 25th in the National Football League. In terms of the red zone, they're converting 57.2 of their red zone trips, which is 23rd. In terms of points per play, they're 26th. In terms of yards per play, and this speaks to the explosiveness point you were talking about in the Seattle game, they're getting 5.1 yards per play, which is 26th. What they are doing fairly well as an offense right now at the bye week is they're converting 42.5% of their third down conversions, which is 11. In terms of the running game that you talked about as well, they're only averaging 3.7 yards per carry, which is 28th in the National Football League. And I think you texted me yesterday that they're only averaging 3.1 yards per carry by running backs, which would be, of course, probably 35th in the National Football League. Last but not least, their yards per attempt in terms of the passing game is 6.4, which is 28th in the National Football League, which also speaks to the point they're not explosive. And their yards per point is 16.6, which means they have to get 16.6 yards to get a point, which is not very good. You want to be more explosive. You want it to be lower, closer to 9 yards per point. So given those numbers, speak to the theme of the show. You are what your record says you are. Just what is the Steeler offense at the bye, and where do you think they can improve, and how do you think they will improve, or if they will improve?
The Steelers offense at the bye right now, in a word, bad. That's just it. Numbers that I would look at: 9.9 yards per completion among their receivers. There are 3 wide receivers on the team that have yards per catch average above 10. James Washington at 10.8, Deontay Johnson, who leads the team in targets, at 11.1, and Chase Claypool at 16.3. Otherwise, you're looking at a running back, Najee Harris at 7.2, a tight end, Pat Freiermuth at 8.8, Juju on injured reserve at 8.6. That number isn't changing anytime soon. Something called Ray McLeod, who has 9 targets on the year, which is 9 too many, at 7.7. Eric Ebron, now clearly the second tight end who doesn't get the ball at all anymore, 6.7 yards a target, which is bested by our good friend Zach Gentry on 4 targets, 7 yards per catch. Nobody makes plays after they catch the ball on this team, and they are not completing any passes down the field at a consistent basis. Deontay Johnson has come up with a couple big plays, and that's great. The fact that we can probably count all of them on one hand is part of the problem. And I'm not necessarily saying it's a Deontay issue. There are a lot of things that come into that. I think Johnson's played very well. We're excited about the direction that he's going. but they simply don't move the ball. I mean, I don't know how to explain it any better than that. We're super excited, Lance. Everyone's freaking out about how great of a first half it was. They scored 14 points. That's nice, but come on, it's not like a dominant effort or anything. To us, though, the cup is so small now, it takes very little to get super excited about an offense. And once again, try to revive the completely dead narrative that this is an explosive big play offense with all this talented receiver and a quarterback who can still throw the ball and a highly drafted running back. None of that is working. Okay. Plain and simple. None of it is working. The offensive line took a step back against Seattle. I don't think they're going to take a step forward and stay there for very long. Now, part of this is, I'm sure we'll touch on this, Zach Banner will return to the starting lineup against Cleveland after the bye week. That's probably a good thing. We'll see. I would assume what that means is Chuks Okorafor is going to go back to left tackle. That to me is absolutely a good thing, because as everyone wants to bag on the rookie Dan Moore, or excuse me, everyone wants to bag on Okorafor as the sole problem of everything that the Steelers have on offense. Dan Moore has been horrifyingly bad. I mean, he's a rookie.
He was particularly bad against Seattle.
I'm giving him leeway of the fact that he's a rookie. I'm giving him leeway of the fact that in the modern era of the NFL, no left tackle has started in their rookie season in week 1, drafted in the 4th round or later. Nobody. I mean, do you realize how many games have been played since like 1970? Nobody has done that except for Dan Moore. And Dan Moore is legitimately one of the worst tackles in the league. I think that's probably why he got drafted in the 4th round, Lance. That's just a guess. Call it that. He shouldn't be out there. He's not going to be out there. That's going to bring some solidity to the whole line. That will help improve things. But the reality is, to this point, you can't grade them as anything but bad. They're just a bad unit.
Speaking to Zach Banner coming back, and that was a question that I was going to ask you. I think what we've seen is the formula for the Steelers offense is the Denver game. I think what they want to do is try to establish the run it a lot, particularly on first down. If they can, run it on first and second down and kind of manage the game that way. Try to keep the scores down, try to convert third downs, play time of possession, really play a style of football that's more old school than new school. With the return of Zach Banner, do you think we will see significant improvements in the running game? Maybe not significant, but just improvements in the running game and pass protection. And overall, do you think the offensive line will stabilize to the point where we're talking about it's consistently a C plus level offensive line? Because I think that's probably the high bar, in my opinion. I don't think this is an offensive line, particularly because of the rookie center, that it's going to be above that. I think it'll have its moments, very indicative of a 500 team. It'll be inconsistent. But how do you think this offensive line will play, and just how much of an impact will the injection of Zach Banner into this offensive line have?
I think they will be looking up at mediocrity most of the season. If they overreach and achieve mediocrity, I think you'll see an offense that's capable of scoring maybe 24 points a game. Will Banner be the linchpin of all of that? It's almost comical to say it, but probably. I mean, it's that rough for them at really all positions, but their tackles are particularly struggling. And Banner, at least what we know of Banner, let's keep in mind, we haven't seen him. Everybody loves Zach Banner because he's playful on social media. He went toe-to-toe with Mark Madden. Therefore, he's a fan hero in Pittsburgh. We don't really know what Zach Banner can do. He played, 14 snaps before he tore his ACL last year. He hasn't played at all this year. He wasn't with Pittsburgh before that. I don't know what we have in Zach Banner. I know that if the team is confident enough to have penciled him in as the starter going into the season, and with him not able to get back on the field right away, they're inserting him into the offense. I think we can fairly say as quickly as he was able to do that. You have to think that their thought is he's a better option at right tackle than Chuks Okorafor with Dan Moore at left tackle. They're making a move that is absolutely necessary. And I think there is something to be said that it's going to improve things, right? It seems obvious. The height in which they can, go with the insertion of a right tackle that we don't really know. It's hard for us to say. Pittsburgh, of course, they're going to tell us that he's the best option. They're going to improve, blah, blah, blah. We all know that. We hear it every week in Mike Tomlin's press conference. We don't know that for sure. We have a good feeling that it's probably going to happen, but this isn't a sure bet by any stretch. It just isn't. So you want to remain optimistic because logically it makes sense. It should improve them to some degree. We don't know how long he's going to last. What happens if there's another injury on this line, Lance? That's a problem. They're not deep inside at all. Joe Haig can only play so many different positions. So we'll see how it exactly. We'll see how it ends up. But I think overall the offensive line doesn't really have much further to go down. So they, by and large, can really only go up at this point or stay stagnant. I think they're looking up at mediocrity, but I think it's something that they can reach if they get a bit more fluidity among all five positions. It's not going to be one guy, but I do think a move that affects both tackle positions, which is to say Banner comes in, I assume a core of four is going to move to left tackle. If and when that happens, I think they have a fundamentally better unit on the field, one that is better prepared. It's not a rookie being thrown into the fire at one of the toughest positions in the league. They will get better because of that. The result of that, I don't know. I don't think they can get a whole lot worse than where they are. Right? It's bad. It's not a good situation. They lack explosive plays, as I've touched on. They can't run the ball. You have 4 runs of 20 yards or more this season. 2 of them are by wide receivers. The other 2 are from Najee Harris, who has 102 carries on the year. So once out of every 50 carries, which is approximately once every other game, he will break one for 20 yards. Najee Harris has 2 touchdowns this year through 6 games. He's not doing much, and I'm not ragging on him. I'm just looking at the production of what they're getting at the position right now, which is the byproduct of everything that's in the offense. They're not getting it done. So they're going to have to do a lot of things, I think, other than just take out one offensive lineman. There are a lot of things they're going to have to improve.
I'm going to look at it from a perspective of half full. And I'm going to look at 2 numbers I think that can improve, or 3 numbers. I like where the third down percentage is at 42.5 out of 11 in the National Football League. I like where that is. If that can stay around the same, if it can hover between 11, let's say there's an uptick, they get it to 8, somewhere around there. They get it to top 10. They stay top 10 for the season. If they can improve with the addition of Banner, the yards per carry by running backs, because 3.1 is terrible. If they can get that possibly closer to 4, I think that has a positive impact on the entire offense. I don't know how much in terms of points per game it lifts them, because if you're at 19.5, I mean, this is a passing league. If you're not getting explosive plays in the passing game, it's going to be difficult to score a lot more points. But I think with the addition of Banner and Chuck's going back to left tackle, if that indeed happens, it'll stabilize the offensive line, and I think they'll run the football better, which will allow them to play in a way that they want to play, which I think will – I'm just going to throw it out there. I think after the bye, with the addition of Banner, if they stay healthy, maybe they score close to a field goal per game more, where they'll get the 19.5 up to about maybe 22.5, 23. I can't see this offense scoring more than 24 points per game. It's just not explosive enough. And I think the offensive line is just a little bit too inconsistent. But if you have an offense, I think that is getting you close to 24 with this defense, and we're going to shift to the defense, I think it gives them a better foundation to possibly win some of these games. But at the bye week, let's shift. Let's look at this defense. Let me give you some numbers on this defense, Neal, and then give me your thoughts on this defense at the bye, and are they what the record says it is? Points per game, the defense is giving up 22, which is 12th in the National Football League. They're 5th in red zone defense, only allowing teams to convert 47.3. In terms of points per play, they're 12th. It takes teams are averaging 0.3 points per play, which is very good. Yards per play, they're 15th. They're giving up 5.6. In terms of third down percentage defense, they're allowing teams to convert 38% of their third downs, which is 13th. In terms of yards per carry, teams are rushing for 4.2. yards per carry, yards per attempt in the passing game. Teams are averaging 6.9 yards per attempt, which is 16th, and yards per point. Teams required to get 16 yards before they score a point, which is 11th. Overall, I think the defense, because of the injuries, Alulu being out and Tuitt being out, and because the pass rush is not as consistent as it was in the past, and given the youth in the secondary, it's just not the same level of unit that we're used to seeing over the last 3 years. I think for this team to win more games consistently, this defense has to be even better. Not sure if it can raise its level, but the big stat to me that stands out is, the points per game and the red zone. I think the red zone is very good, but the 22 points per game for this team to compete consistently and win games, they're going to have to get that down by probably a field goal, which is going to be very difficult. They're going to have to get that under 20, and I think that's going to be very tough to do. Overall, at the break, what's your thoughts of this defense? Do you think how much will it improve with the return of Stephon Tuitt? Is he coming back? What's your overall thoughts of this defense at the bye, and how do you think it will go, for the rest of the season, or can it improve at all?
Let me add this. I'm gonna add this number, Lance, for all my Be More Optimistic fans out there. Number 55. What does the number 55 mean to you?
Joey Porter.
To me, 55 means nothing on this defense right now. Devin Bush has been an absolute non-factor in any game he's played to this point. And I said often at the beginning of this season, don't expect much the first half of the season from him. Just because you can get on the field doesn't mean you can dominate the way that the 10th overall pick should. A guy that they gave multiple assets to draft. He should be a much more impactful player. The knee injury is not going to heal itself overnight. That doesn't change the fact that he's out there doing nothing. A buddy of mine I've known since high school, we were groomsmen in each other's weddings. He texted me just out of the blue the other day. Haven't talked to him in a while. Hey, does Devin Bush still play for the Steelers? If that doesn't tell you, he watched the game. If that doesn't tell you exactly the state of where Devin Bush is, and with it, the Steelers' middle defense, the interior, their defensive front is absent. He's gone. Keith Butler was asked this week why Robert Spillane. Robert
Spillane
to
ask you that.
Was on the field in dime over the 10th overall pick that they gave up assets to acquire. The guy that they needed so badly, they traded for him in the middle of training camp, probably because Bush wasn't going to be able to play. The two of them are not on the field in dime, which dime, by the way, that's one linebacker, one inside linebacker. Of your choice between Devin Bush, Joe Schobert, and Robert Spillane, Spillane should not be your obvious option. And that's where they are right now. Schobert looks like a shell of himself from what we've seen. Bush is not, he's not playing, plain and simple. He's not there. Not really making an impact, certainly later on in the game. He looks timid. He doesn't look like he has confidence in his knee. And that's what I was worried about with him going into the season. And I think that's why they acquired Schobert to begin with. But Schobert isn't getting it done. So a huge part of this defense is in the fact that is all rolling in the opposite direction. The cliche is you want your defense to attack downhill, right? They're all moving back like they're on skates. That rolls down into Minkah Fitzpatrick, who hasn't played well in most of the games they've played this season. He doesn't tackle well in the open field, and we've seen that a couple times. The touchdown that it almost was against Denver.
Against Seattle.
Yeah, and Minkah missed tackles, as did Bush, Schobert, Spillane, Sutton. Count them. Everybody missed tackles in their back seven on Sunday. That was a massive problem. When you have an offense in Seattle that was running such basic stuff, they basically were running away from Cam Hayward, and they were doubling the force side of the play, which is to say, we're running left. The force is the guy who's most likely to come up and make the tackle. It's a linebacker or a defensive back. They're putting two guys out there to stop that, and their cutback lanes all over the place because Hayward isn't there to clean up the mess the way that he has been all season long. It's really the only half of football in which Cam Hayward wasn't completely dominant, and he was in the first half. And it's because he didn't have any opportunity to. Everybody else did, and nobody stepped up. Nobody. They had 175 yards, almost all of it on the ground, except for 2 splash plays in the third quarter. That's on pace for 700 yards of offense in a game. Okay, that's a really bad defensive quarter, and that's what set the tone for Seattle in that game. I put a huge part of that on their inside linebackers, all 3 of them. Spillane shouldn't be out there. I don't know how many teams Robert Spillane would get time on defense with. He'd be a special teams player probably anywhere else. He shouldn't be. They shouldn't be forced to play him as often as they are right now. And I'm not trying to rip on Rob Spillane. He's doing the best job that he can do. He's a journeyman 6-year NFL guy who's probably going to play more special teams than anything else. He shouldn't be out there in key situations where 2 highly paid / highly touted prospect players are sitting down because of Robert Spillane. I mean, there's a problem with that. I guarantee you're going to see far more aggression out of that back 7 against Cleveland. They have some time off. They are going to drill those guys through the floor. That's how bad that performance was on Sunday.
Yeah, that was going to be my question is in the bye week. So overall, your thought of this defense, how it's played till the bye. Give them a grade. I'm guessing it sounds about a C+.
I give it a C to a C+, yeah, but that arrow is pointed squarely down. If Cleveland was at relative full strength and they were playing Cleveland this week, Cleveland would destroy them. The way that Cleveland's able to run the ball, the versatility that they have in their running game in particular, it wouldn't take Kevin Stefanski very long to just savage the Steelers film and see exactly what they need to do. It's obvious. And Pittsburgh is going to know that as well. They're going to have to get far stronger against the run if they want to have a chance to compete against Cleveland. And that's a demoralizing loss, the way that's looking right now. They're going to go on the road in a regular game against a team that legit does have a shot to make a deep run in the playoffs. Pittsburgh, the way they are right now, from what we just saw, and they have a lot of time to fix this, but from what we saw, Cleveland will put 40 on them. They'll have the ball for 39 minutes of that game, the way that Pittsburgh has played defensively the last 2 weeks, really.
Before we jump to the question of sexy tanking, speak to this question from Wes Hickok. Neal, do you think that part of Schobert's problem is that he's trying to make up for the deficiencies of Bush?
If he's trying to make up for it, I'm not sure why he'd be failing at the level that he's at. They wanted Schobert to be a coverage guy. I think that probably Schobert's most attractive ability as a part of that trade was his coverage ability. And we saw in 2019, he was a good coverage linebacker. Didn't do so well in Jacksonville. And I'll call myself out for this. I thought maybe it's, the fault of the outgoing coaching staff that might have been more responsible for that than anything. We're not seeing that. We're seeing right now that Jacksonville definitely got the better end of that trade, regardless of how much money that Jacksonville might have put up to get Schobert off their roster. We see why they did it now. And Pittsburgh's stuck with him next year, too. Keep that in mind. They can cut him and basically have given away a draft pick for nothing. But Schobert, he doesn't play well in coverage, and he's not a straight-up run defender the way I think he probably would have been seen more as early in his career. There's something to be said about Bush being drafted to do some of the stuff that Schobert is doing, but Schobert is doing it so poorly. Robert Spillane is now doing it. Let's get into the dime linebacker. I haven't explained that. What that essentially means with one linebacker on the field, that's the guy that you give the green dot to. And Lance, we've talked about the green dot. The idea is he's the communicator on the field. The guy that's going to be on the field in a dime package, which the Steelers are using a lot of this year. He should be kind of the leader. He's the alpha, the 3-down linebacker. Devin Bush was drafted to be that. If nothing else, he clearly was drafted to be a 3-down linebacker. He's not able to do it. They trade for Schobert and give him the green dot, again, with the expectation that he's probably supposed to be the dime linebacker. He can't get it done. Robert Spillane, if anything, he's not a coverage linebacker. So it's a damning demonstration of, it's a humbling experience, I think, for the two of them. They shouldn't want that to happen. It is. Butler's answer was puzzling too, just in the sense that Robert Spillane does things that these other guys don't do. Robert Spillane is a between the tackles 1984 linebacker. He's not a modern one at all.
Yeah, he's a thumper.
Schobert is not getting the job done. Bush is not getting the job done. That's why they are turning to, or at least they turned to Spillane. We'll see what happens. But um, if either one of them are making up for any deficiencies, I'm not seeing it. So I don't know. Schobert just isn't playing well. Regardless, he doesn't cover well down the field. That speaks something to pass rush, which isn't always there, despite the fact they're doing fairly well with sacks. I thought Alex Highsmith just played the best game of his career, overshadowed by the monster performance that Watt put together in 2 series, despite being largely unnoticeable for most of the game. He put that together at the end. Highsmith was the consistent player. They need to provide more help for that front seven in their secondary. And some of that is coverage. Some of it is tackling. Some of it is a lack of mental mistakes. Somebody else needs to make plays other than James Pierre. Nobody's talking about the fact that James Pierre made the play his life at the end of that game, knocking that ball out of DK Metcalf's hands. Metcalf was stupid enough not to go out of bounds. Pierre punched that thing like he was a heavyweight boxer, or he was like TJ Watt on top of a pile. He knocked it clean through. Great play on his part. 2 weeks in a row, he's made a critical play late in the game. Nobody else in the secondary is doing anything right now. And I think that part bleeds into where the linebackers are as well.
Before we jump into the question of sexy tanking, any update on Stephon Tuitt? You think he'll play on the other half of the bye? Is this, does he play in the Cleveland game? It's becoming very mysterious, and no one seems to have a really good answer. So I'm just asking you to give a shot at it. If he were to return, how much, what's the impact? Is this significant? Is it's going to take him some time to, get acclimated and play football? I mean, just where is this whole Stephon Tuitt thing at right now?
A few things. I just want to quickly address a couple of the questions that got brought in here. Avery Williamson just signed somewhere. I forget where. He's not available, but Pittsburgh gave assets for him and didn't play him, so I'm not sure why they'd want him back. Melvin Ingram, I'm going to guess Melvin Ingram got hurt at some point. Otherwise, I don't know. We saw a great game from Melvin Ingram in week 1. He's gone steadily downhill since then. I wouldn't be surprised if the game plan wasn't to use him as much, because he hasn't been all that effective. Stephon Tuitt. Mike Tomlin addressed this in his press conference on Tuesday. Basically that there is no update. There's nothing at all new. I thought what's really interesting to me is back in 2015, you might remember Maurkice Pouncey went down with, I think, a knee injury in the preseason. And they didn't ever really confirm the nature of the knee injury. It wasn't a torn ACL. It seemed like it was a couple different things. They put him on injured reserve. At that point, they had the option to recall. You don't have to do that anymore. But when you have the designation of the expectation that you're going to come back onto the team, you kind of assume that he's going to, right? He stayed out the whole season. And Tomlin gave the same update every single week. It almost became a game to who's going to ask him this week where Maurkice is. They never did. And he never came back either. To me, it kind of seems more like Tuitt's headed that path. I have no idea. Weird. And anybody who suggests that they do is lying to you. They don't know either. We have no information on Stephon Tuitt. To me, there are other things at work that we don't know about. And that happens a lot. We don't know that he didn't suffer some type of injury off the field that they don't want the media to know about. We don't know if Lane Johnson of the Eagles just came back after missing, I think, a couple games with a mental health issue, as he said. He's back playing now. We know that Stephon's brother was tragically killed before the season. Maybe he's dealing with that. At the same time, though, actions speak louder than the lack of Mike Tomlin's words. What we have with Tuitt is the player, the big contract restructure after March, the move that was thought to be the one that kind of put them over the top to have the cash available, or the cap space available, to sign Watt and still continue to operate with a functional amount of cap space. They restructured Stephon Tuitt. That guarantees basically his place on the roster this season, which isn't a big deal, but he has 1 year in his contract left. They pushed a lot of money into his final year. What that really means is we're not going to cut you next season, and we'll probably extend you. If he's not playing at all, the move that they made guarantees basically that he's going to have to be on the roster next season. Where is he? We don't know anything about him. Is he going to be able to play physically, mentally? We don't know that. You have to think, though, that in them restructuring that deal when they did, keep that in mind. It wasn't in March before any of this happened. It was in like July, I think, whenever it is that Watt signed his deal, August,
right.
Into September. That's when they made the move. So they, obviously they know more than you and I do, Lance, but it does seem really strange that they would make that transaction, which basically puts him on the roster next season if he had some type of significant physical ailment. So to me, just reading between the lines, my useless 2 cents on the matter, I think it's a mental issue, and I have no idea if he's going to come back this season or not. And anybody else who tells you that they know one way or another is lying, because they don't know either.
I think that's a great segue into sexy tanking. And if Tua doesn't come back, we've talked about sexy tanking a lot. I mean, Tua not coming back doesn't, obviously the defense is not going to improve with no Tua. The level of patience that they're showing to it also shows me that, the issue is significant and they're in no rush. That this again leads to sexy tanking, which I think they are. And if you guys aren't familiar with sexy tanking is, me and Neal teased the philosophy or a topic or something we brought up earlier on earlier shows about sexy tanking, that they're in a rebuild. This is a tanking year, but the reason why it's sexy tanking is because Benjamin Todd Roethlisberger is playing quarterback. And when Ben breathes and puts a helmet on and takes snaps, Steeler fans believe that the Steelers are competing for a Super Bowl. I still think they're sexy tanking, and I don't think Ben Roethlisberger will be the quarterback next year. Has any of that changed for you? Are they still sexy tanking in your opinion? And do you think Ben will not return like you previously thought as the quarterback next year in 2022?
I want to go over what sexy tanking is to me. It's they are putting out a team that is going to see better days in the future. A lot of young guys are out there. Tanking in and of itself is the act of trying to lose. They're not trying to lose, but they are not fielding the best roster that they could for this season. They're fielding the best roster that they can for down the line with a quarterback that isn't there for nostalgic reasons. He's there because if they cut him, it costs basically the same amount as what he counts on the cap right now. So cutting him meant you were starting Mason Rudolph with Ben costing $26 million on the cap. Not cutting Ben means you're starting Ben with Ben counting $26 million on the cap. Which option do you want? I'd much rather have Ben than Rudolph. I'd much rather have the franchise for the sake of the future, for the sake of their reputation. I'd rather them, considering the quarterback position is effed either way. They weren't going to be good at that position going into the year. And frankly, if you thought otherwise, you don't know what you're talking about or you're lying to yourself. They weren't going to be good either way. This was the best way to get past Ben's contract to move into the future. The real total overhaul is going to be much more apparent next season when Ben isn't there anymore. It's going to feel like a much different team. To get to that point, they had to start a rookie at center. They had to draft a running back in the first round. They had to draft the tight end in the second round. They had to make these guys prominent members of their team. Now, Freiermuth is going to get into his. Don't worry about it. There are a lot of guys that don't have catches or yards in this offense. It's not him. It's the offense. The moves that they had to make this season are moves that are built more for the future. Younger guys that are playing now, they're going to be much better as the season goes on. That's what they're doing. That's a rebuild, okay? Sexy tanking is the term that we're using to describe a team that isn't actively trying to lose, but has 11 million in cap space, has holes across their roster, guys that they could have brought in, but didn't because they're one-year solutions. Melvin Ingram is a one-year solution. They brought him in just to fill gaps, basically. Trey Turner is not a long-term solution for them at right guard. He's a one-year guy, and I don't know who else is going to pay him next year. It's not going to be Pittsburgh. They're going to have to find guys to do the same thing again next year. That's how you rebuild your team, though. And they're trying to save as much cap space as they can to get past Ben's contract as it counts for them next year. To answer your question, Lance, no, there is no way in the world Ben Roethlisberger is coming back next season. He wanted to play this year, and they helped him do that. He took a pay cut to help them keep him on the team. It was a mutually beneficial agreement in a year that they didn't have a better option. They'll have a better option next year, as we're seeing right now. If that's Mason Rudolph, they're tanking again. They're going to do the same thing. He's not their long-term option either. We know that. Dwayne Haskins is not their long-term option. Some player in college right now, you hope, is their long-term option. And this year is going to put them in a draft spot with assets that they don't have to use on starters with their first 4 picks. That's not common, by the way. You don't normally draft 24 overall and have a roster full of holes the way that they did. They couldn't trade picks last year. This year, they're going to be able to do that a little bit more. I wouldn't be surprised if they moved up. If you want my guess on next season, which I know we didn't talk about, but I'm going to give it to you anyway, they're going to start Rudolph in week 1. They're going to draft a quarterback in the 2nd or 3rd round that nobody is going to like, and he's not going to be able to beat Rudolph off for the job. And they're going to be in the same spot going into 2023. That's just the way they do things. Don't ask me why. I don't see them moving up to get a quarterback, but that's probably what they're going to have to do. And this isn't a great quarterback class either. There are some names, there are some prospects. Doesn't look all that good. Not for probably where the Steelers are going to be. I think they'll be 13, 14. You might be able to get a guy there. They'll be in position to move up, but that's what they won't do. So you're going to get some scrub like Kellen Mond last year, just a dog who doesn't belong on an NFL field for at least 2 years. That's the guy they're going to get, and Rudolph is going to be their starter next year.
No, Neal, you're wrong completely. Their starter is going to be Aaron Rodgers next year because him and Mike Tomlin shared a wink on the sideline.
Exactly. They respect each other because they've been colleagues for 15 years. But that means Rodgers is coming over here. Green Bay is going to want. Okay, so let's dovetail this into something else. I know you love it when I go off script here, Lance, but let's talk about the Desean Watson trade. Allegedly, there's some movement in that area. Miami has kind of been the front runner for that. If they land Desean Watson, it is probably going to be for at least 2 first-round picks, minimum. And that's with...
I was thinking 3.
Yeah, they probably want 3. I think that something's going to get worked out there. I don't think they're going to give them 3. You can't trade 3 first-round picks for the baggage that Watson has. I'm not sure in NFL history anybody's had as much baggage as Watson does right now.
Oh, there's been
and to give up that much of your future for it, it's insane. With the contract that he has, that's insane. That contract, the deal that Miami and Houston would theoretically work out will be one of the most convoluted trades in NFL history. But it's going to set the bar for what Green Bay is going to want for Aaron Rodgers, who's like 40 years older than Desean Watson. He has 1 year left on his deal currently. You have to renegotiate a deal with Aaron Rodgers, the best quarterback of the game right now, in my opinion. Putting all of that together, Pittsburgh, to acquire Aaron Rodgers, is going to have to trade the meat of the next 3 drafts. Does this look like a roster that can really survive with a quarterback without bolstering what they have right now? I don't think they do. That's a lot of money that they have to spend. They got a lot of money due for TJ Watt. There are other guys they're going to need to sign. I don't think Rodgers would want to come play for that. It's not about money for him. If it was, he'd stay in Green Bay. He wants out. He wants to be able to control movement. They're not going to have the flexibility to do that. Certainly not without draft picks. So, Aaron Rodgers is not a good option to Pittsburgh unless Green Bay wants a first for him. A first and a second. If that was the ask, I think Pittsburgh would do it. I also think a lot of teams would do that. This, Lance, is the magic of the market. That's how his price drives up. Denver is going to be hot for him. They have a team that can win. They have young superstar level skill talent that Pittsburgh doesn't have. They have a great defense themselves. They have a defensive coach. You put Rodgers on Denver right now in a division that already has Mahomes, Herbert, and Carr. You put Rodgers in there, they can swing with all 3 of those teams. Right now, they're not going to be able to, and that's what you're seeing in the standings. Denver needs Rodgers. They will give up the capital to do it. Pittsburgh won't. They can't get into a bidding war against Denver. Of all teams, there's no way that's going to happen.
And I'm not sure with Denver, not to belabor it anymore. I'm not sure what Drew Lock's contract situation is, but they could also throw Drew Lock in the compensation as well, to throw a quarterback in there, because I don't know what they're going to do with Jordan Love. But I think Felicia described it best, though, with sexy tanking. I don't see Ben coming back next year about the Ben question, but I do believe they're trying to at least not have a losing season in spite of it. And they're in a weird position. They're not necessarily trying to win, but they're not trying to lose. And that's what sexy tanking is all about. But in the last 10 minutes of the program, we're going to pick the remaining schedule. We're going to pick the schedule after the bye week. We're at 3-3. Steelers are at 3-3. I think we both predicted 7-10. I wanted to see if that still would hold up after the bye week. And as we've seen these teams and as we've seen in Pittsburgh. So let's do this real quick, Neal. First game after the bye week, the Steelers are at Cleveland. Give me your pick in that game.
Cleveland's going to win that. I don't think it's all that competitive of a game. Cleveland will win that. They're going to have most of their guys back by that point. They have wholesale injuries across their team right now. I wouldn't be surprised to see Denver upset them, but I think they have enough time with the running backs in particular. They should get the tackles back by week 8, and with that, they're definitely good enough to beat Pittsburgh.
Yeah, if they have Chubb back, I think the Steelers lose. That's Nick Chubb's football team, not Baker Mayfield's. The Chicago game, I'm going to say the Steelers beat Chicago.
I have flashbacks to that a bad Chicago team and a bad Pittsburgh team meeting in prime time back in 2013. Do you remember that game? Antonio Brown. That was the game Brown. Keep in mind, this is early 2013. We know that Antonio Brown had his contract extension at that point. He didn't become who he is now until that game, the second half of that game, because at the end of the first half, you might remember, Brown and Todd Haley almost got they almost came to blows over whatever it was. Ben got the ball to Brown like the entire second half. He ended up with like 9 catches for 200 some yards and a touchdown catch that defied physics. I mean, it was unbelievable. The route that he ran, his ability to come down with the ball where he did. His star was launched that game, and Chicago won by like 30 points. So I'm going to take Pittsburgh to win this, though. That said, none of these are going to be gimmies. I've got them 1-1 now at this point. They're going to lose to Cleveland. They'll beat Chicago.
So we both got them at wins. They beat Detroit, but it's a very tough game. Just because the Steelers don't score a lot of points at this point, but I'm going to pick them to beat Detroit. What you say, Neal?
Mike Tomlin coach team is not losing to Dan Campbell coach team with Jared Goff under center. It's not going to happen. Kudos to them for actually having won a game this year. I really didn't think they would. Pittsburgh can beat Detroit, though. They should win that game.
They make the trip to Los Angeles to Inglewood across the street from my mother's house. I will not be going to that game. I'm not paying to sit next to people and try to catch COVID. So I think they lose that game. I think that's a loss.
Yeah, Chargers are a tough team. We're seeing good things from them. They're young. They're not quite there yet, but they're a playoff level team. I don't expect that to be especially close, except for a reasonable chance that Pittsburgh takes over the stadium again. They tend to play better there than they do other road stadiums. I think there's a reason for that. A lot of Steelers fans in LA, they get tickets to that game, COVID or otherwise. So Chargers will win that. They're just simply a better team.
I'm going to pick the next two really quickly. I think they lose at Cincinnati, and I think they lose at home against Baltimore. I think the quarterbacks are better for both teams. Both teams are better coached. I think they're just better across the board. So I'm going to go ahead and jump and give 2 L's.
Yeah, I'm saying 2 L's as well. Division games should be more competitive, and I think that the Steelers are good enough to be able to give both of those teams runs for their money, considering that the history between them. They know each other very well. That equals out a lot of things, but we're going to see Baltimore continue to make plays the way that they have been, despite a lot of injuries. That a lot of those guys are going to be back by that point and playing well. And Cincinnati, I don't think they've peaked as a team yet this season either. They're just better. Both teams are really just better than Pittsburgh's going to be. I think by that point, they can give them a run for their money, but they're going to take L's in both of those. That's a 3-game losing streak now I've got them for.
Let me just jump to week 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18 and just package these all together. I think they lose at Minnesota. They lose to Tennessee, Kansas City, Cleveland, and Baltimore. I think the Steelers lose.
It's easy.
I think the Steelers lose No, I'm gonna say the Steelers beat Minnesota. I think somehow they beat Minnesota and they lose the last four, and so I have them winning three more games after the bye and finishing 6-11 as opposed to 7-10. So let's run through it real fast for you, Neal. Give me your Minnesota pick.
I think they're going to beat Minnesota. I think that really is kind of the linchpin game for them the rest of the way. Or excuse me, not. I think they'll beat Minnesota's not a good, solid all around football team. On a short week, I have more faith in what the Steelers are able to do and how they're able to play the game, especially late in the season. I think they'll beat Minnesota on their Thursday night game. I think they'll beat Tennessee. I don't. Tennessee is not a very good team. Overall, you're going to figure them out by then. Derrick Henry's going to wear down by then. If he doesn't play, they're done. He might be the MVP of the league on that alone. And then they'll lose their last three. So 7-10 still holds firm to me. Minnesota and Tennessee are the last, in my opinion, should win games for them from Thanksgiving through the end of the year. So I think it's going to be a pretty tough finish for the black and gold this season. But I think we kind of knew that going into it.
And we say this not to be grim, not to be the brothers Grimm on the show. We're just looking at the football team where they are and looking at the teams that they play. Because when you look at the record remaining, I mean, they're playing some good teams. I mean, Cleveland's 500 right now, but when healthy, we think Cleveland is very good. The Chargers have been very good. Cincinnati, Baltimore have been very good. Tennessee, I think I have a little bit more faith in Tennessee than Neal has. I think that was a great win against the Buffalo Bills, although I really am not impressed by Ryan Tannehill. Kansas City's Kansas City, and the Cleveland-Baltimore games to end the season are going to be very tough games. They're divisional games. I think if Cleveland is right and they have everything, they're very difficult. But, I think that picture is tough for Cleveland if everything is off script. But it's just where the Steelers are. I think the Steelers are the fourth best team in the AFC North. And I have them 6-11. Neal has them at 7-10. But before we get off the show and complete the program, I want to get into my pet peeve. Here's my pet peeve, and I don't mean it adds, and I don't mean to pick on Davis McMillan, but one of my biggest pet peeves is the word should and how the word should is used in sports. And how should is particularly used by fans in sports. There's a saying, I'm trying to remember the phrase that if was a fifth, we'd all be drunk. And there's some other ones about if she would be my uncle, but I'm not going to, but should doesn't mean anything. Should just means you didn't do it. That's all should mean. Should never be used in sports. And as fans, we often like to say, well, if we had a did this and we had a done that, we would have beat Green Bay and the Steelers should be 5-1. No, the Steelers should be absolutely what they are, which is 3-3. And if we're going to use the word should, they probably should be 2-4. Exactly. Save for a block punt. And that's the other thing I don't like about the word should in sports. Oh, I love that one. If wishes were fishes. And should is always affirmative, right? For fans.
Yeah.
It's always affirmative. Like it could be negative as well. And so that's why I hate should. That's one of my pet peeves. The Steelers should not be 5-1. The Steelers are 3-3. They have earned that. You're talking about a team that's minus 15 in point differential. If we're talking about should, it should be worse. When you're minus 15 and you're 500, what you are is lucky. You're fortunate. So I just hate, that's my pet peeve. And here's my other pet peeve, my last pet peeve. Maybe it's I said it. If the season ended today, the Steelers would be a playoff team. Well, guess what? The season doesn't end today. There's 11 more games. And the only time we need to be talking about the playoffs is after the 11 have played. And I hate that. I hate those tweets every week on Twitter. How I saw one of those tweets. I saw one of week 1. If the season ended today, the Steelers would be the number 1 seed in the AFC at 1-0. Oh, brother, please help me. Please help me. Please. So those are my pet peeves. That's my I said it. I hate should, and I hate if the season ended today, the Steelers would be the 7th seed. That's my rant for the day.
It's a good one. It's a good one. I enjoy doing the elaborate, useless but fun for engagement posts on social media about things that aren't especially relevant. One of them being playoffs ended today. Pittsburgh would be in, and Cleveland and Kansas City wouldn't be. It's fun. I don't think it ultimately matters. My pet peeve, simply put, is, and it's funny because it's not a simple topic. It's how fans view the concept of analytics in sports. When we talk about analytics, what most people view in their minds is the idea that they're watching the World Series of Poker on ESPN and they see percentages by each player's hands. There are a finite and limited set of probabilities that go into a game of poker with one deck of cards. In football, it is limitless. There are so many different things that can happen. There are not perfect plays. There are not, vastly better. Okay, let me rephrase this. There are better play calls than others. There are better things that you can do. The difference is in those play calls, though, is not in and of itself the level of success. And that process in and of itself is not analytics, okay? What analytics refers to is more what your general focus should be on certain things. Decision management is what decides when you're going to go for 4th down, when you're going to kick a field goal versus punt in certain parts of the territory at certain points of the game. Decision management is the umbrella that kind of covers all things analytics, okay? The analytics people within a team crunch numbers to tell teams what their probability is in a vacuum. What that means is it does not take opponent into account. It does not take injuries into account. It doesn't take personnel into account. What it says is, typically speaking, you add 3 more points to your win probability if you kick a field goal here versus going for it. That only matters if you have a team that can accomplish that. That's a whole other set of percentages. And it's one that, frankly, and Steelers fans might not want to know this, that doesn't apply to them the same way that it does to Baltimore, one of the best short yardage teams in NFL history. Baltimore can go for it on every 4th and 3, and probably should, in my opinion. Pittsburgh can't. They don't have an offense that consistently get 3 yards. It's not a play calling issue. It's a personnel issue. When Mike Tomlin makes those decisions, it doesn't mean that he doesn't know the analytics or whatever bullshit term goes on social media about it. It simply means that they don't have the personnel. And if you don't realize that, you don't need analytics. You need to watch football. They're 2 completely different things. A team that has an advantage in personnel can do whatever it wants, analytically, statistically, in terms of probability. They can do all of that. If you don't have talent, you can't do much. So really, it starts with the players. They have to execute on the field before you can worry about what plays are being called. If they can't run advanced plays, it doesn't matter. If they don't have specialty stuff that another team hasn't seen them do, they have less of a chance of converting anything on 4th and short. And we know this because the Steelers did it all the time in 2014 and 2015 when they had the personnel to do it. And they were pretty good at it as well. So when we get into analytics, let's know exactly what it is that means. And let's understand that this team doesn't have a whole lot of flexibility in terms of its roster right now to just go for it on 4th and short every single time. They're not good enough to do that.
Before we get out of here, Neal, I know there's a bye, obviously, on Sunday. Anything Steeler Wires fans should look for? You guys digging deep into anything?
Dig into the site see what's there. I honestly, I don't know. I'm not. I'll be honest with you, Lance. You ask me that every week. I keep meaning to tell you to stop asking me. I don't have that level of oversight. I'm not a micromanager, and I've got 34 sites to look at. I know what some of them are doing because it's planned stuff. This week, right
Right.
now, I haven't worked specifically with the Steelers.
Okay. I'm always trying to tease it. I'm
And I
trying.
appreciate it. It's more embarrassing the hell out of myself, which for the most part is fine. I'm just saying that I'm throwing my hands in front of the mercy of the court here. I don't know. I don't know what they're doing today.
Or maybe people listening to the show can tell you what's going on
Yep. In
Steelers
fact,
Wire.
they probably could better than I am right now. I know that I've got 7 meetings after this. There are all kinds of things that nobody here is interested in hearing about. That's more of my world now.
Well, hey, let's get on out of here, and I will take my cue from Big Melvin, Omega Sci-Fi in the house, and
Yes, he is too white for me.
I will.
I used to run that site. I'm pretty white.
And let me take my cue from Mel and go ahead and read the words. Thank you, Steeler fans, and always remember to tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe.